Hello there, good afternoon. This is Al 24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. Ash cloak in the runway has hampered relief efforts to Tonga as the scale of the damage from volcanic eruption and tsunami becomes clear. New Zealand is trying to send clean drinking water and other supplies, but planes cannot land at the main airport. At least 7 protesters were shot dead by Sudanese security forces on Monday during anti-coup rallies in the capital Khartoum, according to the Civilian Allied Sudanese Central Electors Committee. Amid the unbeaten spread of COVID-19 cases across the country, the Pakistan Medical Association on Tuesday warned that the next 2-3 weeks could be critical for the country. Russia moves troops to Belarus for giant drills amid Ukraine invasion fears. The West has voiced fears of possible invasion of Ukraine by tens of thousands of Russian troops gathered near its border. United Arab Emirates has pledged retaliation after drone attack killed 3 people and wounded 6 in Abu Dhabi. The attack was claimed by the Yemen's Houthi rebels, who took responsibility for setting off explosions in fuel trucks. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headlines. The volcano in Tonga has caused major damage in the island, cutting out from the rest of the world. Experts express concern about the seas of the eruption and are on the other lookout for potentially further volcanic activity. More with Nabil Khazini.
Following the volcanic eruption in Tonga, the southern Pacific Ocean island became isolated from the rest of the world. The massive eruption created a gigantic cloud of ash, which was initially estimated to be at 15.2 kilometers in altitude, and later rising up to 30 kilometers high. Images from above show an area of hundreds of kilometers of the island covered with ash and water vapor. Concerns raised about contamination of food and water supplies, as well as acid rain. Authorities urged people to wear masks and drink bottled water. Alarming images showed an entire village destroyed on Mango Island and numerous buildings missing on nearby Atata Island. Death toll stood at 2, but with communications cut, the true extent of casualties was not clear. The surveillance flights sent by New Zealand and Australia had been delayed as a result of the ash cloud covering Tonga. The eruption cut the internet and disrupted communication with the island. A full assessment was therefore not possible. Waves of up to 4 feet hit Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga, a country of around 100,000 people who are in an urgent need of assistance. UNICEF Pacific announced their readiness to work together with the government of Tonga and its partners to ensure urgent life-saving support to be provided to families and children in the aftermath of the volcanic eruption and tsunami. However, Tonga is concerned about the risk of COVID-19 reaching the island through aid deliveries, as it is currently COVID-free.
Unusually high waves attributed to the eruption of the undersea volcano in Tonga caused an oil spill on the Peruvian coast. Local authorities announced the spill was controlled within hours and there is an ongoing process to clean the area. The eruption on Saturday caused waves that crossed the Pacific. In Peru, 2 people drowned off a beach and there were reports of minor damage from New Zealand to Santa Cruz, California. Sudanese political forces called for civil disobedience today, Tuesday, after the killing of 7 demonstrators and wounding 100 others during the police dispersal of demonstration in the vicinity of the presidential palace on Monday, calling for a return of civil rule and the removal of military from power. Zara Farjani on Watch Follow.
At least 7 protesters were shot dead by Sudanese security forces on Monday during anti-coup rallies in the capital Khartoum. The Central Council of the Freedom and Change called on the Sudanese to engage in a comprehensive 2-day civil disobedience starting today, Tuesday.
I am here today to resist the military coup that happened on the 25th. We hope to reach the democratic civilian path, and hopefully the Sudanese people will achieve all their goals.
The statement of the Central Council indicated that what it described as the coup authority has committed massacres against the defenseless people who came out asking for their freedom and dignity and were met with showers of bullets, anti-aircraft guns, and all forms of violence. The Sudanese police announced on Tuesday in a statement that the Khartoum demonstrations witnessed organized violence and it dealt with the least amount of legal forces, especially attempts to attack police stations and forces in gathering places using tear gas and water cannons.
I am opposed to dictatorship and any regime that comes against the people's freedom and justice.
Yesterday, Monday, 9 members of the United Nations Security Council called in a joint statement all parties to exercise the utmost restraint in Sudan, which is witnessing bloody violence during demonstrations against the military rule. For its part, the U.S. State Department announced that 2 U.S. envoys are on their way to Khartoum to demand the authorities to put an end to the violence against the demonstrators and to sit at the dialogue table with the various Sudanese forces and formations.
Yemen's rebel Houthi movement said it had carried out a military attack on the United Arab Emirates as authorities in the capital Abu Dhabi announced suspected drone strikes targeted an industrial area and the airport, triggering a fuel tank blast that killed 3 people and wounded 6. More what follow.
Police in Abu Dhabi said 3 petroleum tanker trucks exploded in an area close to the city's port, near storage facilities used by the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, causing the death of 2 Indians and a Pakistani working for oil giant ADNOC, while a fire also ignited in a construction area at Abu Dhabi Airport. The United Arab Emirates is a part of a Saudi-led military coalition that supports Yemen's government against the Iran-aligned Houthi rebels, who have repeatedly targeted Saudi Arabia with cross-border attacks. Houthis' attack was the first deadly assault on Emirati soil acknowledged by the United Arab Emirates and claimed by the rebels, who said they had fired ballistic missiles and deployed armored drones.
بيان صادر عن القوات المسلحة اليمنية.
The group had carried out a successful military operation against important and sensitive Emirati sites and installations using both ballistic missiles and drones.
وعدد كبير من الطائرات المسيرة.
The United Arab Emirates has pledged reprisals after the attack. Emirati President Advisor Anwar Gargash tweeted that the United Arab Emirates authorities are dealing with the heinous Houthi attack on some civilian installations in Abu Dhabi. United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan described the attack as a heinous criminal escalation in a statement by the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The European Union strongly condemns the attack against civilians, and it calls for restraints to avoid further escalation. Furthermore, the EU urges all parties to engage with the UN Special Envoy to achieve and end the fighting and a comprehensive and inclusive political agreement. On its part, Algeria vigorously condemned the attack that targeted the Musafah area and Abu Dhabi International Airport. Yemen's year-long conflict has caused the United Nations calls for the world's worst humanitarian crisis, killing tens of thousands of people and leaving many on the brink of famine.
Germany warns that Russia faces severe consequences if it invades Ukraine as German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock visits both countries, and German Chancellor holds talks with NATO Secretary General to discuss this matter. Stoltenberg has invited Russia and NATO for talks to address concerns to both sides.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, in a first official visit to both countries, Ukraine and Russia, said she is seeking a diplomatic solution to ease tensions between the 2 countries. Baerbock's 2-day trip comes as the buildup of Russian troops and military equipment on the border to Ukraine is raising fears that Moscow might be intending to invade its neighbor. In remarks made ahead of her arrival to Ukraine, Baerbock delivered her message to Russia.
European solidarity for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Any further aggression against the country would come at a high price for the aggressor, we emphasize once again today.
As for her visit to Russia, she held talks with Russian colleague Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, seeking to ease tensions amid fears that Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine. At a joint press conference, Baerbock said that the Russian troops buildup near Ukraine had no understandable reason, and it was hard not to take it as a threat. She added that there will be no security in Europe if the rules are not reliable. The minister also referred to a possible sanctions disguised by Western nations if Russia tries to invade Ukraine. Meanwhile, the German chancellor and the head of NATO urged Russia to de-escalate after the two met in Berlin to discuss the perceived threat of the conflict. Both agreed that Russia would face severe political and economic consequences if there was an invasion.
It is clear that there will be a high price to pay and that everything will have to be discussed should there be a military intervention in Ukraine.
On the other hand, Stoltenberg said NATO allies will need to engage with Russia on any concerns it may have, urging Russia to talk.
The risk of a conflict is real. NATO allies call on Russia to de-escalate, and any further aggression will come with a high cost for Moscow.
The European Union might face some of the toughest challenges if Russia does invade. It is also expected that NATO would reinforce its troops' presence in the Baltics and Poland. The challenges might include imposing sanctions on Russia, managing a cut in supplies of gas to Europe, and accommodating refugees fleeing any war.
To different مثلا influential former leader of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, denied any conflict with his successor Tuesday, and his first appearance since the unprecedented violence in the Central Asian country sparked rumors of power struggle, saying that President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has full power, naming his hand-picked successor and adding that there is no conflict or confrontation between elites. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson denied on Tuesday an accusation by his former advisor that he had lied to Parliament about a lockdown party, saying nobody had warned him the bring your own booze gathering might break COVID-19 rules. Johnson faced the most crucial crisis of his occupation after revelation about gathering during lockdowns. Someone British people could not even bid farewell in person to dying relatives, and Queen was mourning with her husband. Or let me say her husband, pushed into the top job to get Brexit done. Johnson won his party's biggest majority in more than 30 years, but now faces calls to resign from opponents and even some of his own lawmakers.
Nobody said that this was something that was against the rules, it was a breach of the COVID rules, or we were doing something that wasn't a work event, because frankly I don't think, I can't imagine why on earth it would have gone ahead or why it would have been allowed to go ahead. I can categorically tell you that I never saw I've seen the email, the Martin Reynolds, the email of invitation. Clearly that was not phrased in a way that was right.
After the event?
Yeah, I only saw it the other day. I saw it, when it emerged.
In Pakistan, the rise in COVID infection caused a fresh challenge for the health department as it is facing staff shortage. At least 60 doctors and paramedical staff have tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 4 days. Already facing shortage of doctors and paramedical staff, the health department is struggling hard to ensure patients do not suffer. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said Tuesday night that the government plans to issue quasi-emergency measures for 30 prefectures when the Omicron variant of the coronavirus is increasing as nationwide cases hit record 30,000 cases, with quasi-emergency measures already in place. Yamaguchi, Okinawa and Hiroshima prefectures, applying it to a further 30 prefectures that have either requested or may request such measure, would bring the total to 60 or, let me say, 47 prefectures. Brazil started a vaccination campaign for children aged 5 to 11 years old, and the first child to receive the vaccine was an 8-year-old ingenious boy who was immunized at a hospital in Sao Paulo.
A drive to vaccinate children aged 5 to 11 against COVID-19 kicked off on Monday in Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and 8 other large cities in Brazil, despite objections from President Jair Bolsonaro.
Are you going to vaccinate your child against something which someone young can catch and have an almost zero chance of dying?
A dozen state capitals began administering shots to children under the age of 12 over the weekend. Then on Monday, precisely 1 year since adults in Brazil began to be inoculated against COVID-19, it was the turn of Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and the other large cities.
The vaccination campaign could have started before the delay in Brazil, which was a result of the government denial of the pandemic and the lack of leadership.
Over the past 6 months, that mass immunization campaign has been key to Brazil's having experienced a dramatic drop in its number of COVID-19 deaths. But Bolsonaro has downplayed the severity of coronavirus and been skeptical of the vaccines from the beginning. He was even temporarily banned from Facebook and YouTube under their fake news policies for claiming that reports suggest the fully vaccinated have been developing HIV/AIDS much faster than expected.
Taliban leaders in Afghanistan are institutionalizing large-scale and systematic gender-based discrimination and violence against women and girls. A group of 36 United Nations human rights experts have said in a statement that they are concerned about the continuous and systematic efforts to exclude women from the social, economic, as well as the political spheres across the country.
These policies constitute a collective punishment of women and girls grounded on a gender-based bias. Continuous and systematic efforts to exclude women from the social, economic, and political spheres. These policies have also affected the ability of women to work and to make a living, pushing them further into poverty.
A Norwegian court on Tuesday was set to consider right-wing extremist Andreas Behring Breivik's request to parole a decade after he was convicted of murdering 77 people in Oslo and at youth camp at the island of Utøya. The Telemark District Court in Skien will weigh whether Breivik continues to be a threat to society as families of his victims, who are concerned he would use the hearing as a platform to share his political views, urge that he be deprived of the attention he is trying to master. Martin Luther King's family and civil rights advocates urge lawmakers to protect their voting rights. Kamala Harris also urged the Senate to act, warning the voting restriction would make it difficult for more Americans to vote. Marim Zian on what's follow.
On Monday, the family and friends of civil rights pioneer Martin Luther King Jr. marched in Washington, D.C. in support of a bill that would protect voters from racial discrimination.
Now we're going to hear from
the family and more than 100 national and local civil rights organizations walked across the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge as part of the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day DC Peace Walk, urging President Joe Biden's Democrats to pass a bill in the Senate. Vice President Kamala Harris encouraged the Senate to act, saying that efforts to restrict voting in some states might make it more difficult for millions of Americans to vote.
Today, our freedom to vote is under assault. In Georgia and across our nation, anti-voter laws are being passed that could make it more difficult for as many as 55 million Americans to vote.
Martin Luther King III spoke at a rally ahead of Monday's march, urging Democrats to push through voting rights legislation. The march across the bridge was headed by Martin Luther King III, his wife Andrea Waters King, and their daughter Yolanda Renee King.
Senator Sinema, Senator Manchin, our future hinges on your decision, and history will remember what choice you make.
59 years later, it's the same old song and dance from Senator Manchin and Sinema. But my father did not let up for a moment. and neither have we. More than 180 partners, over 1,000 faith leaders, and millions nationwide fought to make this vote possible. You are the reason President Biden spoke out last week and is swinging for the fences. You are the reason Speaker Pelosi has brought about powerful legislation and every procedural solution possible to protect Black and brown Americans.
Democratic backers contend that it is necessary to combat a surge of new voting restrictions enacted by Republican-led states, which election experts say will make it more difficult for minorities and low-income voters to vote.
Executive from the nation's largest airline asked the Biden administration for immediate intervention in the planned rollout of 5G technology near major airports on Wednesday, warning of dire transportation and economic consequences. The representative of 10 carriers asked the administration in a letter for further delayed rollout near airports where Federal Aviation Administration flight restrictions take effect once the technology kicks in. The aviation would in concern 5G signals will interfere with aviation technology, including the radar altimeter on-board plans. The lawyer of an outlaw Nigerian separatist leader whose trial is due to resume on Tuesday accused authorities of extending his client's time in custody by filing new charges against him. Namadi Kanu helps Ingenious People of Biafra, a group he founded in 2014 that is pressing for secession of his Igbo ethnic group's homeland, which covers a part of southeast Nigeria. Migrant camps and shelters in Mexico are running out of space as families continue arriving at their doors. The COVID pandemic has brought the U.S. asylum process to a virtual standstill, and things are now getting worse after a controversial Trump-era policy was re-implemented. Zahra Furjani on What Follow.
Mexican migrant camps and shelters are running out of space due to the significant increase in the number of families arriving at their doors. Shelter directors in Tijuana, Mexico say that both space and food for everyone is limited, which makes it impossible to have more asylum seekers, and they're forced to turn them away.
It is very painful to see women and children arriving at our doors asking for shelter.
Large arrivals of migrants extending the limits of the services shelter can provide is not a new phenomenon, but the COVID-19 pandemic has made things more complicated. Over a year, the UN International Organization for Migration has been using a hotel in downtown Tijuana as a temporary housing and a quarantine to new arrivals, but it wants the US and Mexico to provide extra help.
Those shelters that are able to receive families are overcrowded right now. They're over 100% in capacity. A lot of them have 3 or 4 spaces, but the families are still coming.
Families say they've been in the migrant camps for more than 2 months. However, they don't consider returning to their homes in southern Mexico an option from the gang violence and extortion they face. Further complicating matters is the re-implementation of a US policy known as the Migrant Protection Protocol, which forces asylum seekers to return Mexico while their cases are processed. With MPP scheduled to be reinstated in more cities along the border, it's feared overcrowded conditions at shelters and migrant camps will only get worse.
More international news in this roundup by Nabil Khazini.
Fears of worsening violence in Iraq grows after 2 explosions occurred in 2 banks associated with Kurdish politicians in the Karada district of central Baghdad. The incident was the latest in a series of attacks to hit the capital in a number of days. On January 13, a rocket attack targeted the US Embassy and the Green Zone and wounded several civilians. Authorities of the Jammu and Kashmir administration has detained a journalist under a controversial law. The journalist was jailed under the Public Safety Act, which allows the detention of an individual without trial for 6 months. The detainee was arrested 1 day after he was granted bail in a separate case of alleged criminal conspiracy. An earthquake of 5.3 magnitude in a remote western region of Afghanistan killed at least 26 people and damaged hundreds of houses. According to local authorities, about 700 to 1,000 houses have been damaged, leaving rescue workers in search for possible survivors. Afghanistan is already in the grip of a humanitarian disaster. The United Nations had said it needs $5 billion in 2022 to stop a humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan. North Korea conducted its fourth missile test of the year. The country fired 2 projectiles into the ocean off the east coast of the Korean peninsula. According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency, the test was test-firing tactical guided missiles, which are short-range ballistic missiles, claiming they hit their precise target in the East Sea.
Sri Lanka unveiled a $1 billion relief package as President Gotabai's government seeks to temper growing public anger over the surging prices of essential food and medical items in a country that's running out of foreign exchange to pay for imports. The government will raise civil servants' salaries and pensions, remove some taxes on food and medicine, and provide cash for its poorest citizens, a move critics says won't help Sri Lanka's state of finance and soaring inflation. Coming back to the economic news, let's follow this report by Zara Furjani.
US drug maker company Pfizer announced it was making a €520 million investment plan in France over 5 years to help tackle COVID-19. The plan consists of a partnership between Pfizer and the French company Novacep to develop an anti-COVID pill treatment. According to Pfizer, part of the €520 million will also go into research in France, including partnerships with biotech firms. The People's Bank of China declared it was lowering the interest rate on $110 billion worth of one-year medium-term lending facility loans to 2.85%, a decision that aims to help boost the economy amid a slow in China's economic growth. The Chinese National Bureau of Statistics said gross domestic product (GDP) grew by 4% for the last 3 months of 2021 from a year earlier. During his annual address before the National Assembly, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro expects the South American country's economy grow by more than 4% last year. Maduro announced that after 5 years of the economic war of boycotts and blockades, Venezuela is back on track for economic growth. This comes after 8 years of recession and rising prices. Staffing shortages along with fewer customers are having big impact on retail sales in the United States. Small businesses owners in the US say they are paying more and therefore need to raise their products' prices. The Commerce Department in the United States said the US retail sales fell 1.9% in December amid the shortage of goods and surging infections.
The renewable energy in Kenya is seeking total self-sufficiency by the year 2030, as it currently accounts for 73% of Kenya's installed power generation capacity, while 90% of electricity in use is from green sources, among them geothermal, wind, solar and hydroelectric installations.
Kenya is one of the leaders in renewable energy, with 92.3% of electricity generated locally from renewable sources, hydro, geothermal and wind power, which is 3 times the percentage of renewables in electricity generation globally, including solar power. The country installed the biggest wind power plant in sub-Saharan Africa, the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, which is steadily exploiting and deploying available geothermal potential, estimated to be 10,000 megawatts. In recent years, the country has made significant progress in advancing access to affordable and clean energy. It has increased access to electricity from below 30% in 2013 to over 75% in 2022. In Kenya, renewable energy is one of the key energy subsectors that significantly contribute to overall energy mix. In Africa, Kenya leads in exploiting renewable energy sources to provide energy required to complement the realization of Vision 2013, which aims to a total self-sufficiency in energy. The aim of Kenya is to reduce carbon emissions from the energy sector while ensuring that all people have access to clean energy, in which the Renewable Energy Department is responsible for. The department is also responsible for leading the planning, development, implementation, promotion, and execution of structures for the development and regulation of renewable energy and energy efficiency through research and planning. According to the Renewables 2018 Global Status Report, Kenya ranks 9th in the world for its geothermal power generating capacity.
Interior Secretary Dub Howland announced that her agency will formally begin the process of identifying federal waters to lease to wine developers by 2025. This step will fuel the United States with a greater deal of sustainable energy that will make a sustainable leap in the economy of the country.
President Biden's administration greenlit a major offshore wind project to supply power to New York, arriving as part of a broader push to build out renewable energy and tackle climate change. The plan will enable the U.S. to develop large-scale wind farms along nearly the entire coastline, the first long-term strategy from the government to produce electricity from offshore turbines. The announcement came months after the Biden administration approved the nation's first major commercial offshore wind farm off the coast of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, and began reviewing a dozen of other potential offshore wind projects along the East Coast.
The Interior Department is laying out an ambitious roadmap as we advance the administration's plans to confront climate change, create good-paying jobs, and accelerate the nation's transition to a cleaner energy future.
The announcement, which seeks to advance Biden's ambitious climate change agenda, comes as a sweeping legislation to support those goals is stalled in Congress. Biden has pledged an all-of-government approach to fight global warming and decarbonize the U.S. electricity grid by 2035. Developers will be required to make every reasonable effort to use union labor to build their projects and to outline plans for supporting creation of a domestic supply chain for the industry.
The Indian classical dancer Pandit Birju Maharaj died of heart attack at the age of 83. According to reports, the Kathak maestro was playing with his grandson on Sunday at his home in Delhi when his health worsened. After being taken to the hospital, he was declared dead. Birju Maharaj has been suffering from a kidney complaint and was under dialysis treatment. The classical dancer was born in 1938 to a family of Kathak devotees and performers. Moving on now to sport, the Best FIFA Football Awards 2021 ceremony held as a virtual TV show from the home of FIFA in Zurich. Ground of two household names, Alexia Putellas and Robert Lewandowski, as the outstanding players in women's and men's football respectively. Poland and FC Bayern Munich striker Lewandowski was recognized as the best FIFA men's player for the second year in succession. For her past, Spain midfield Putellas, who had made the best FIFA women's player shortlist for the first time, capped her exploits with FC Barcelona and Spanish national team by winning the prestigious award. It is worth mentioning that the AFCON is still playing and Senegal is still having a game with Malawi in the 78 minutes. The game is still having a draw result. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. Ash cloak in the runway has hampered relief efforts to Tonga as the scale of the damage from volcanic eruption and tsunami becomes clear. New Zealand is trying to send clean drinking water and the other supplies, but planes cannot land at the main airport. At least 7 protesters were shot dead by Sudanese security forces on Monday during anti-coup rallies in the capital Khartoum, according to the civilian Allied Sudanese Central Doctors Committee. Amid the unabated spread of COVID-19 cases across the country of Pakistan, Medical Association on Tuesday warned the next 2 or 3 weeks could be critical for the country. Russia moves troops to Belarus for joint drills amid Ukraine invasion fears. The West have voiced fears of possible invasion of Ukraine by tens of thousands of Russian troops gathering near its border. United Arab Emirates has pledged retaliation after drone attack killed 3 people and wounded 6 in Abu Dhabi. The attack was claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels, who took responsibility for setting off explosions in fuel trucks last day. That's all what we have gathered for our news today. See you tomorrow and bye-bye.